A major anniversary for a world leader, and then just complete silence. What exactly is going on when one of the most watched couples on the planet lets a huge milestone like that just drift by without a single word? Today, we're diving into the shifting dynamics of the Trump family, and it all starts with the puzzle of their 21st wedding anniversary.
So yeah, let's get right to the heart of it. 21 years of marriage, and they're constantly in the public eye. So how did their anniversary pass without so much as a peep from either of them? That's the question that really kicked off a whole new wave of speculation.
And this is where things get really interesting. You see, the White House tried to get ahead of the story. They released this official photo, but the public, well, they just weren't buying it at all. The internet basically exploded, with people saying, "No way, that's got to be AI," and questioning the whole relationship. It was this perfect storm of the official story versus what everyone else seemed to believe.
To really understand why everyone was so skeptical, we need to rewind the clock to January 22nd, 2026. What happened, and maybe more importantly, what didn't happen that day, well, it paints a really curious picture. Okay, so on the day they were supposed to be celebrating a personal milestone, they were literally worlds apart. The president flies back from a huge global summit by himself, and their social media, which is usually a window into their world, was just cold. It was all business, no mention of their anniversary. It was just weird.
And I mean, this post really says it all. It's his 21st wedding anniversary, and his public message is all about global policy and business deals. Not a single word about his wife, their life together, nothing. The silence was, well, it was deafening.
But here's the thing, this anniversary wasn't some random blip on the radar. Nope, it was really just the latest chapter in a long story of public scrutiny and, let's be honest, a lot of speculation about what's really going on in their marriage.
So if you look at this timeline, you can kind of see the story unfold. They get married back in 2005, they become the first couple in 2017, but then look at this. Just a few months before that silent anniversary, there's a huge shift. Melania officially changes her residence. Now that was a really big deal because it seemed to make official what people had been whispering about for years.
And this is where the story gets almost mythical. Even when they're on the same property at Mar-a-Lago, they're reportedly living completely separate lives. Melania is said to be living in her own tower, like a modern-day Rapunzel. It just creates this powerful image of distance, right there in their own home.
And you know, it's not just rumors. You've got author Michael Wolff who put it pretty bluntly. He basically said their arrangement isn't a marriage in any way that we would traditionally define it. He's painting this picture of two people leading totally separate lives, which just reinforces that whole idea.
But what if we're looking at this all wrong? Biographer Mary Jordan throws out this fascinating alternative theory. What if this isn't a marriage that's failing, but one that works perfectly for two people who are self-described loners? This idea suggests that their separate lives might not be a problem at all, but actually a mutually agreed-upon setup that works for them.
Okay, but while the whole world has been watching Donald and Melania, a new player has been quietly stepping onto the stage, and he might just be the most important variable in this entire equation. Their son, Barron Trump, who is suddenly all grown up.
For years, this is the Barron Trump that the public knew. He was the shy little kid, carefully kept out of the spotlight. He had that distinct Slovenian accent that always reminded you of his mother's roots.
But then, boom, election night 2024. And the world saw a completely different Barron. The shy kid was gone. In his place was this towering, confident 19-year-old with a deep voice and a real presence. It was a pretty stunning transformation, and it was kind of his unofficial debut on the public stage. And this wasn't just a physical change, not by a long shot. At just 19 years old, he was already a student at a top business school. He'd had this ambitious, even if short-lived, business venture, and most importantly, he was becoming a key political advisor in his father's inner circle.
So you might be asking yourself, how much influence can a 19-year-old really have in a presidential campaign? Well, as it turns out, a lot. Barron's role wasn't just for show. It had a real, measurable impact on his father's strategy, especially when it came to reaching a whole new generation of voters. His influence was actually so significant that he got a nickname for it, the unofficial podcast advisor. He was the one who got it, who understood how to reach younger audiences by pushing his dad to go on new media platforms that the old guard of political strategists had totally overlooked. And the result of that advice? Honestly, it was staggering.
Donald Trump didn't just win the youth vote, he dominated it by a massive 36-point margin. And who did he thank for this game-changing win? Not his campaign managers. He credited his teenage son.
And you don't even have to take my word for it. Here's the president himself explaining that it was Barron who was pushing him to go on podcasts like Joe Rogan's, tapping into these huge audiences that traditional media just doesn't reach anymore.
Okay, so let's connect all the dots here. With Barron emerging as this major political player, the power dynamics within the Trump family and, by extension, the White House, are being completely rewritten right before our eyes. So what we're seeing is this really fascinating new power structure. Melania has always been fiercely protective of Barron, but now that son, who his own mother calls Little Donald, is a political force in his own right. This creates a powerful new alliance, a mother-son duo right at the heart of the White House. So, this brings us to the big final question. While we've all been busy dissecting Donald and Melania's marriage, Barron's incredible rise forces us to ask something maybe even more important. Has the real center of power in the Trump dynasty already shifted to the next generation?